Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. My older sister went missing. Out of fear of losing the protection of the man she loved, Ethan Carter, my parents schemed to make me and him spend a reckless night together. I ended up pregnant, borrowing a child as an excuse to marry into the Carter family, forcing their heir to tie himself to me. After my daughter was born, for her sake, Ethan and I maintained a calm relationship, outwardly harmonious but inwardly distant. Until the day my sister, whom everyone believed to be dead, returned unharmed. Fortunately, aside from our baby still being too young, there were no deep ties between Ethan and me yet. Before things became impossible to undo, I took the initiative to ask for a divorce. But he didn't agree immediately. Ethan looked at me and said, "This marriage isn't something the Lynn family can just start and end whenever it wants." When our baby Grace was 4 months old, Ethan, as usual, went into her room at night. Just before he came in, I had finished nursing her and pulled my shirt back up. The man who was always so cold in front of others now bent down and held his daughter in his arms, his large hand gently patting her back as he spoke softly, soothingly. "Let Daddy see. Why is my little girl being so good today?" Grace gurgled back at him. Seeing father and daughter so attached, I quietly went back to my own bedroom. Lately Grace had been teething. Tonight she was in so much pain that I felt uncomfortable too. I tried to endure it for a while, but finally had to get some medicine, using a cotton swab to dab it on my sore spot. Suddenly, I heard the door to my room push open behind me. It was Ethan, who should have been with the baby, coming in. I bit my lip against the pain and hurried to adjust myself. I had always tried to avoid letting him see me like this, but in the end he still caught me. His tall frame paused for a moment. We were clearly husband and wife and had a child together, yet we were strangers, as if we had never met. He opened his mouth to explain, saying he had just come to get a change of clothes. That's when I noticed a wet spot on his shirt. "Grace spit up milk?" I asked nervously. He softened his voice. "It's fine. The nanny's with her." That night, because of one mistake, I got pregnant and married him. I once thought our marriage was only a formality to him. But from the later months of my pregnancy onward, Ethan began staying at the mansion more often. I could see he truly cared about our first child. Everything related to her, he personally arranged with care. But he and I still slept in separate rooms. After Grace's 100th day, during a visit from our private doctor, the topic of marital relations came up. Ethan's expression stayed calm as he simply asked how much longer it would be. Later, when only the two of us were together, he said, "Since we've chosen to step into marriage, I'll take responsibility for you and the baby. For me, this marriage isn't just for show, Anna. My name is Anna Lynn. He usually only calls me Anna, neither distant nor intimate. Why don't we try to accept this marriage together?" From that day on, the staff began moving his clothes into my bedroom. And tonight, Ethan himself came into the room, watching him step inside to change clothes. I glanced at him taking off his shirt, his tall frame under the dim light making my heart tremble faintly. Slowly, I walked up behind him and finally leaned my face against his solid back. He had just returned from our daughter's room, carrying with him a clean, fresh scent that made me pause in a daze. I whispered, "Don't go back again. Stay. Okay." He was silent for a moment, then lowered his head to look at me. "You just put on medicine. You're still uncomfortable. I won't do anything that hurts you." That night he really did stay but didn't touch me. Late at night, I turned to look at the man beside me. He treated me gently, perhaps because he believed that night he was the one who had done wrong, the one who had hurt me, but he didn't know the truth. That day was a scheme carefully laid out by my parents. Ethan had once been the man my sister Emily Lynn dreamed of. The Carter family was the most powerful in River City, while my family was nothing more than small merchants. Normally, for the rest of my life, I should never have had the chance to touch someone like Ethan Carter, a man born at the very top. Until the year I first entered high school, my parents nearly emptied all our savings to buy a villa in the wealthy district. The villa next door belonged to the Moore family. They had an only son my age, Ryan Moore. Ryan practically fell for me at first sight. He treated me with such devotion, as if he'd be willing to pluck the stars from the sky just to give them to me. It was him who introduced me and Emily to their circle. Ethan was one of Ryan's friends. Among all of them, he stood out the most. Talented, confident, aloof, and distant. Hard for anyone to approach. Because I knew Ryan, they all treated me politely. Everyone but Ethan, who never once looked my way. During high school, Ryan took me to more than a few of their parties. But still, Ethan and I hardly had any interaction. He wasn't just indifferent toward me. He seemed to keep his distance from every girl. That was until one day I accidentally saw him standing with Emily, smiling as she spoke with him. Emily was only a few months older than me. She wasn't my biological sister. She was the daughter of my father's late best friend, taken in and raised by my family. She was lively and talented, the only one in our school whose grades could rival Ethan's. There was a natural harmony between them. By junior year, Ethan had chosen to study abroad. Not long after, Emily begged my father to let her go overseas too, admitting bluntly that between her and Ethan, what they had wasn't just one-sided. A few years later, our families once considered waiting until I graduated college to arrange an engagement between me and Ryan. But the very year I was about to graduate, my family went bankrupt. Even their villa next door was sold. After that, my mother never mentioned the engagement again. When the collapse happened, Ryan left River City. Not only I, but even his friends never heard any news of him again. That same year, Ethan returned home to take over his family's business. Emily hadn't yet finished her studies, so she stayed abroad. I wasn't sure how things between them had progressed. But for the first time, my father's small company managed to make it onto the bidding list of Carter Corporation. In my family, the only person who could ask for help was Emily. Only she had the ability to seek Ethan's assistance. I was certain they already had some kind of relationship. Then came the car accident. The news that reached us said Emily had died. At the time, my father was away on a business trip. Only my mother rushed overseas to handle things, and in the end, all she brought back was the news of her death. 3 months after the funeral, my father had the chance to attend the anniversary celebration of Carter Corporation. He had planned to go only with my mother, but he forgot an important document at home and asked me to bring it, leaving it in the lounge upstairs at the hotel. It was Ethan's first year running the company. Because nobody yet understood his preferences, their business partners had arranged to send women to please him. That night, Ethan had been drinking, and the room was thick with chaos and the stench of alcohol. In the haze, he and I ended up together. The next morning, Ethan immediately traced the problem back to those business partners and dealt with them mercilessly, showing no leniency. My parents stood outside, pretending it had all been pure coincidence. Ethan thought I had only been caught up by accident, an innocent victim dragged into the mess. But I knew better. With my mother's nature, there had been far too many coincidences. There was definitely something wrong. After that, I became pregnant and news reached the Carter family. The situation couldn't be cleaned up anymore, and Ethan was forced to marry me. A man of his background, born into a powerful family, was not someone who would normally let others manipulate him. If one day he learned that this marriage had been a trap my parents had set, I didn't dare imagine what the consequences would be. The next morning when I woke up, Ethan was no longer in the bedroom. Going downstairs, I saw him holding our daughter while listening carefully as the nanny explained how to handle weaning. A man like him was actually taking this seriously. Seeing me, Ethan lowered his eyes to mine. "Babies on formula can still be healthy if you wean her now." He paused, then added, "I'm not making the decision for you. It's just a suggestion. This is something only you have the right to choose. Make the decision yourself." The same excellent qualities he'd had since school were still intact now. Only now they showed in his role as a husband and father. He was less distant, a little less cold. Coincidentally, that was exactly what I had been considering too. I hadn't expected him to share my thoughts, not just for health reasons, but also because I had something personal coming up. The Carter family might have raised me into a wealthy wife, but recently I had applied for and been accepted as the assistant to the editor-in-chief of a fashion magazine. The office was in District C, across the river from Carter Corporation headquarters. A few days later, while I was picking up documents to prepare for the job, I received a call from the butler. "Madam, Mr. Carter has a social event tonight. The driver's car had a small accident on the way. Would you be able to pick him up?" I asked for the address and arrived outside the private room of a lakeside club. Laughter spilled out from within. The one sitting with them was Ethan. Someone was joking with a girl about which guy she liked among them. Except for the one you keep staring at, someone teased. Any of the others can be introduced to you. That one's already married, another voice added, and even has a kid. The girl clearly didn't believe it. She only knew one person in the group, but she also knew all these young men were around 23 or 24, the age for enjoying life. I stood outside the door and realized the person they were talking about was Ethan. Then I heard his low, even voice. I have a daughter who's almost half a year old now. Someone then praised how adorable his little girl was. Like a sweet piece of candy. Her smile is just too sweet. Ethan only replied lightly, she looks like her mother. Someone chimed in, she really does. She's the spitting image of Anna back in high school. Just one smile from her could make all the boys' hearts flutter. No wonder Ryan Moore treated her like a treasure. Who would have thought Ethan would be the only one unmoved? And yet, in the end, they became husband and wife. Ethan's voice dropped, cutting through coldly. You know she's my wife now. You should also understand that Mrs. Carter is not someone to be gossiped about in public. I didn't listen any further. I knocked on the door and stepped in. That night, Ethan had drunk some alcohol. Driving home, he sat in the passenger seat, eyes closed, pretending to rest. I couldn't help sneaking a glance at him. He was only half a year older than me, just turned 24 and already a young father. No wonder people didn't believe it. Compared to his peers, Ethan had matured far too early. What are you looking at? He suddenly opened his eyes. I hesitated for a few seconds, then asked softly, do you feel uncomfortable from the alcohol? He looked straight at me, his voice calm. I'm fine, Anna. He called my name in the dim car, then slowly leaned closer. His lips, carrying a faint trace of wine, brushed lightly against mine. My body trembled as I closed my eyes. His breath smelled slightly of alcohol, but wasn't unpleasant at all. That night, for the first time, Ethan came home and didn't go to our daughter's room first. Instead, he pulled me into the bedroom, my back pressed against the door, his warm hand sliding lightly across it, but still hesitating, not going further. I pressed my face into the hollow of his neck. He couldn't hold back a soft reminder about the front clasp. After a moment, he finally realized what I meant. That night, I understood for the first time that Ethan Carter, the man everyone saw as distant and untouchable, was in the end just an ordinary man too, with his own desires and instincts. From that night on, except for social events or nights he had to stay at the office, he came straight home. In this marriage, we slowly began to resemble an actual husband and wife. A month later, after I had officially started working, I happened to run into an old friend from high school outside the magazine's building. He was also one of Ryan Moore and Ethan's friends. His media company shared the same building as our magazine. He called out, Anna, hesitated for a moment, then finally said, recently I managed to get in touch with Ryan. The first thing he asked about was you. He looked at me and added in a low voice, I didn't dare tell him you and Ethan are married. At noon that day my father called. He asked when Ethan and I would be free. It had been a long time since I'd been back to the Lynn family home, so I asked him what it was about. My father wouldn't say clearly over the phone. Anna, it's complicated. I need to tell you in person. That afternoon, I went with the magazine's interview team to Carter Corporation. This month's feature was on finance and the interviewee was a senior manager, not Ethan of course. Our magazine couldn't possibly get an interview with him, and besides he didn't like dealing with the media. While we were waiting in the conference room, through the clear glass door, I saw a group of people walking past. The man at the front was tall and broad-shouldered, his slim waist and strikingly handsome face making him stand out in the crowd. Look, that's the current CEO of Carter Corporation, someone whispered. Even people used to seeing male celebrities couldn't help staring, their eyes glued to him. I wonder which socialite managed to lock down a man like that, another murmured. Seeing I didn't react, my colleague beside me asked, Assistant Lynn, you're so calm. Don't you think CEO Carter is incredibly handsome? I gave a faint smile. He's handsome, I said simply. Aside from the female editor-in-chief who directly supervised me, no one at the magazine knew I was married with a child. If it weren't for coming here, I normally wouldn't have had a chance to see him. I heard CEO Carter is already married. Who's his wife? Someone asked. Seems like it's an arranged marriage without love, another replied. During the break, I went alone to the Carter Corporation's break room to make coffee. As I stood on tiptoe to reach a coffee tin on a high shelf, a man's silhouette came up behind me. Immediately I knew it was him. His long, slender fingers brushed lightly across the back of my hand, helping me take it down. You came here without telling me, he murmured softly. If I hadn't seen you in the conference room, I wouldn't have known. I froze for a moment, surprised he'd even noticed I was working here. I didn't come to see you, I answered, looking up at him. Anna, he said, his voice low and deep. I couldn't remember when he'd started calling me like that. His cool fingertips brushed my ear, touching the pearl earring there. Your earring's loose, he murmured. He bent his head low, carefully fastening it back in place. Then everything shifted. He locked the break room door, pulled me over to the window, wrapped an arm around my waist, and lowered his head to kiss me. In that moment I opened my eyes slightly and saw his face close to mine. Eyes closed, completely absorbed in the kiss. His high, straight nose was right there in front of me. Ethan sensed my distraction and gently bit the tip of my tongue, the delicate, careful movement making my ears burn hot. I also wanted to try accepting this marriage. I didn't even resist this life anymore because being with Ethan Carter no longer felt as suffocating as before. Just as someone in the conference room had said, this marriage had begun as an arrangement without love. Even now, no matter how entangled we'd become, we had never spoken openly about love. It was like an unspoken agreement. I didn't mention Emily Lynn, and he had never mentioned Ryan Moore in front of me. Emily's accident had been almost 2 years ago. The peaceful life I had now was exactly what I'd hoped for, and I had even less reason to dwell on his past. That weekend my parents came over. For the past 2 years, my father's company had been partly acquired by Carter Corporation and turned into a subsidiary. He still held his position and some shares, and the company's value had multiplied. Ethan, besides being my parents' son-in-law, was in fact my father's superior. Yet, in front of my father, he had never once acted from his position as CEO. From before our marriage until now, Ethan had always treated my father and my family kindly. When he greeted my father, he even called him Dad just like I did. When my parents arrived, he was rolling up his sleeves, crouched down, attaching a corner guard to the table to protect our daughter. My father moved to help, and when they were finished, I came over with a plate of fruit, about to tell him to have some. But as I lifted my face close, Ethan leaned down and brushed a soft kiss against the corner of my lips in front of my parents, our daughter, and the nanny. I hadn't even reacted before he realized and murmured by my ear, "It's become a habit lately, Anna. Sorry." When I was later feeding Grace her formula, my mother came over and spoke softly. "Looks like you and Ethan get along after all." I only lowered my head, looking at my daughter, and didn't answer. My father continued, "You don't have to forgive your mother if you can't, but she doesn't regret it." That day, my father seemed hesitant, as if he had something to say. In the end, it was Ethan who asked him directly, "Dad, what brings you here today?" My father finally said, "Ethan, Anna, about Emily's accident 2 years ago. The truth is she didn't die." He explained that after the car accident, Emily had fallen into the river and wasn't found, so they believed she'd passed away. In reality, someone had saved her. She'd been abroad for the past 2 years under unclear circumstances, and had only recently made contact again. I listened in disbelief and after a long moment asked, "Is she okay now?" "She's fine," my father said. "She's coming back tomorrow." Tomorrow happened to be my grandfather's birthday banquet, and Ethan would also be attending. This year's banquet was unusually grand. Most of the guests were really there for Ethan's sake. The banquet had barely begun when Emily, who had been missing nearly 2 years, appeared safe and sound. For the family, it was good news. Emily didn't look much changed, only evasive, saying nothing about what she'd gone through in those 2 years. Beside me, Ethan sat with Grace on his lap. Emily spoke up first. "Back then, I applied late and ended up entering the same university abroad where you were studying. I became your junior." She looked at Grace with a smile. "You're a father now. This is your daughter with Anna. She's adorable." Ethan's gaze on her was calm, betraying no emotion. Emily then asked, "May I hold the baby for a bit?" But Ethan didn't agree. With so many guests around, he simply told the nanny to take our daughter upstairs. Inside, I couldn't stay as composed as he was. I went alone out to the yard for some air. The banquet was being held at my family's house, the garden large and filled with cars and guests. I didn't notice a car approaching until suddenly a voice beside me said, "Careful." It was Ethan. He wrapped an arm around my waist, lifting me out of the way and turning his back toward the car as it passed, holding me tightly in his arms. "I'm fine," I whispered, trying to ease out of his arms. But Ethan still wouldn't let go. "Anna," he said, "I know why you are unsettled tonight, but now between you and me we already have a family, a child." He lowered his head and slowly kissed my lips as if to affirm that nothing could change it anymore. By the time the banquet ended, it was already late. My grandfather asked us to stay overnight. So Ethan and I stayed in my old room while Emily's room was on another floor. When I went downstairs to get pajamas for Ethan, I happened to run into Emily coming down the stairs. Her gaze stopped at the clean set of men's sleepwear in my hands. At that moment my mother appeared. Out of the whole family, she had always been the coldest toward Emily, the adopted daughter. She looked straight at her and said bluntly, "Their husband and wife sharing a room. Of course, intimacy is only natural." After that, I didn't bother much about Emily being back. Half a month later, I heard she had joined my father's company to help out. The department she was involved with dealt directly with Carter Corporation. The fashion magazine where I worked was on the same street as Carter Corporation. Every day when I left work, I rode in Ethan's car. Today, he still had business to handle, so he told me to wait in his lounge. His assistant took me up by the private elevator. As soon as I arrived, Ethan came by to see me first. Seeing that I just had my nails done, he took my hand and played with it for a while, holding it tightly in his palm. He tugged lightly at the collar of my thin blouse, baring my shoulder, then bent down and kissed my skin there. His voice was low and husky. "Wife, you smell so good." Suddenly there was a knock at the door. I quickly pushed him away. Someone outside spoke. "Mr. Carter, I have something for you." Ethan went out first to deal with it. It was Emily's voice. "Did you make an appointment?" Ethan's tone was cold and distant. "We've known each other a long time. If I come to you for something personal, can't I?" she said. "It's about Anna. Please just hear me out." In that moment, I almost knew what she was going to say. And sure enough, it was something bound to come sooner or later. Emily spoke. "That day of the accident, I didn't fall into the river. I was only injured. It was my foster mother who forged a death certificate and forced me not to return home. I also don't want you to keep being deceived. The first night you and Anna were together, it wasn't a coincidence. My father let it slip. It was my foster mother. I knew early on you'd been set up by your business partners, and she deliberately sent Anna in. You were all already pieces on the board. Anna has long known too. You chose to take responsibility, but this marriage from beginning to end has been a lie. When Emily left, only a door separated us. Just minutes earlier, Ethan had called me wife. Yet now I had no idea how he would react outside. Since childhood, my mother had always imposed control and dominance over me. I had resented it, resisted it, but unlike Emily, I was her only biological daughter. In the cold, she still tucked blankets around me, kissed my forehead. She gave me a life of silk and luxury so I could stand at the very top. That was why she couldn't accept seeing all her efforts for her own daughter end up becoming a wedding gown for the foster child. She always said, "It was for my own good, for the good of our family." That night, the partners hadn't only wanted to send women to Ethan. They also wanted leverage and scandals to use against him. But Ethan turned the tables, destroying them completely. Having witnessed firsthand his ruthless, merciless methods, I knew if my own parents were in their place, I could never be indifferent. Concealment was just another form of deception, wasn't it? I clung to a fragile bit of hope, but in the end the heavy stones still came crashing down. The lounge door opened. I looked toward Ethan. In the past, he and Emily Lynn had been such a good match. Yet, in the end he had married me. A marriage as important as his had turned into nothing more than a scheme from a small family like mine. And now, with him just learning what my mother had done to Emily, it all became a ridiculous, humiliating joke. Emily had returned. If one day he wanted to go back to her, I wouldn't let myself or Grace become an obstacle. I forced myself to speak first. If you want a divorce, I'll cooperate. Perhaps what Ethan was about to bring down on the Lynn family would be even harsher than divorce. He was the one holding the highest power, trained to never show joy or anger. Anna. He still called me the same, but his gaze was colder than I had ever seen. At last he gave me his answer. This marriage isn't something you can start when you want to start and end when you want to end. His fingers pinched my chin, forcing me to look into his eyes. For the first time I saw anger clearly there. What do you take me for? Someone you come to when you feel like it, and throw aside when you're bored. The reason he didn't immediately agree to a divorce was because it struck his pride and dignity. You asked for a divorce so bluntly. Don't tell me it's because you heard about Ryan Moore, and that he'll come back to River City for you. 3 days later, Ethan had to go on a business trip to attend the International Trade Conference in the capital. The trip had been arranged long ago. Emily would also be going. She even posted news of the event on her personal page. That was also the first time since our marriage that Ethan and I truly quarreled. Coincidentally, my magazine was hosting a charity gala that week. I threw myself into work that evening. Most of the guests were celebrities from the entertainment industry, along with partner brands and renowned sponsors. The editor-in-chief didn't speak French, so I was helping her translate to converse with a brand representative from France. When I lifted my head, I caught sight of a familiar figure in the seating area across the room. That section was fairly quiet, and though the lighting was dim, it couldn't hide the strikingly handsome face and commanding presence. It was Ethan. He was supposed to be away on business, so how could he be here? Even if Carter Corporation supported charity events, there was no need for the CEO himself to attend, especially not an evening that leaned more toward entertainment than business. He didn't reveal his identity, yet someone still recognized him. Isn't that the CEO of Carter Corporation? A girl whispered. She'd seen him there before. Why would he come to our event? Even the editor-in-chief glanced his way. I found a chance to slip quietly out of the ballroom. Ethan was waiting for me in the lounge behind it. It had only been a single day apart, yet when we faced each other, neither of us spoke at first. Then he sighed softly, took my hand and pulled me into his arms. His voice was low, calmer now. In the end, whose fault it was doesn't matter. It's still me who has to give in first. He held me tightly and added in a quiet murmur, but coaxing you is what I should do. Yesterday, I shouldn't have been angry with you. Then he went on. Do you think I don't know what happened back then? What your parents did? The reason I didn't hold it against you is because no matter how absurd or ridiculous it was, the truth is that between you and me, something really happened that can't be changed. He leaned close, his voice rough and hoarse by my ear. That night, everything that should have happened and shouldn't have all happened. Even though precautions were taken, you still became pregnant. In all of that, compared to the schemes you were forced to endure, what I have to bear as a man is nothing. So he had known all along. The one who should have felt most wronged was me. I buried my face in his chest and whispered. I hid it because I used to be so afraid of you. You don't need to be afraid of me anymore, he murmured. I went on softly. Once I accidentally scratched your face and even the baby scratched you too. You still went to work and meetings with those marks left on your skin. The masterpieces of me and our daughter. From that moment I found it funny and I realized you weren't so high and mighty as I thought. You could even be bullied by us. Ethan finally just said. That's why the past doesn't matter. It won't affect our marriage now. He stayed until the charity gala ended. Then took me out for a late meal. By then it was already late at night. We went to a private club owned by one of his friends, a place not open to outsiders. A few of his old friends happened to be there as well, and they invited us into their room. Years ago, back in school, I had once joined them for a gathering. But unlike then, this time I was sitting right beside Ethan. Seeing us arrive together, someone laughed. Back in high school, the young master Ethan Carter never had a girlfriend. And now he's the first one to bring his wife along. Then everyone seemed to realize something and the room suddenly went quiet. No one dared to joke further. Only Ethan remained calm and natural. Someone quickly changed the subject, turning to him. You came just in time. My father's been pressuring me for a grandchild. I thought about having my girlfriend give me one, but these girls just want to use the child to climb higher. That won't work. Aside from you, Ethan, none of us has kids. You're already a father. Share some experience. What's it like? Is it easy? Ethan replied casually. Even the most well-behaved child will cry and fuss. You're always worrying about how they'll grow up. Afraid they'll fall, afraid they'll get sick. You worry about little things like whether they can roll over, and at 6 months whether they can sit up. Your phone stays on 24/7. Afraid you'll miss any news from your wife or child. Even your neat freak habits and so-called principles disappear. He spoke of details I hadn't even known myself. Then he added, but the hardest part is always on the mother. Giving birth isn't a joke. The one who'd ask grew sheepish. Maybe I should think this over again. He hadn't even finished when the door burst open. The one who entered was his friend and media. He stepped in eagerly. Guess who I brought tonight? But when his eyes fell on us, the words caught in his throat. Ethan, you're here too? Outside the door stood a tall, lean figure. My heart jolted as I lifted my eyes to that familiar face. Ryan Moore had returned. And not only him, Emily Lynn, who was supposed to be in the capital, was with him too. Tonight, everyone was gathered. I was in an evening gown with Ethan's suit jacket draped over my shoulders. Ryan's eyes locked on us, on me standing close beside Ethan. In the next moment, without a word, before I could even react, Ryan lunged forward. One hand grabbed the collar of Ethan's shirt. The other swung a fist straight at him. Everyone was caught off guard. Ethan managed to dodge partially, but the blow still landed hard. His expression went dark and cold, his jaw clenched tight. In the noisy chaos, neither man spoke until Ryan was the first to break the silence. Stop pretending to be so righteous. Ethan's back remained straight, his voice calm and frigid. Even so, that's no reason for you to still be longing for my wife. With that he struck back. No one around dared to intervene. No one had ever imagined it. Ethan, cold and aloof, and Ryan, always easygoing with everyone. In the end, the day came when the two of them fought. I was shoved by the crowd and nearly fell against the edge of a table. At that moment, Ethan glanced in my direction, distracted for just a second, and Ryan immediately gained the upper hand. Emily quickly stepped in front of Ethan, and the punch landed squarely on her shoulder. With a sharp crack, she dropped to the floor. Ryan wouldn't hit a woman, and that instant was when the fight finally stopped. Emily clenched her teeth against the pain, turned her head weakly and asked, "Are you okay?" Someone gasped, "Emily, you're bleeding." Blood ran down her hand. It turned out she had pressed against a shard of broken glass on the floor. She was hurt because of Ethan. Someone insisted she had to be taken to the hospital right away, and suggested someone go with her. Just then Ethan spoke. He himself had cuts on his body, even across his face, but none of it dulled his striking features. Emily looked at him anxiously. "Do you need to go to the hospital too?" Ethan only frowned slightly. Even Emily hadn't expected that. Right after she had taken an injury for him in front of everyone, he would respond so coldly. "You're Anna's sister. How can you still call me your senior? Do I need you to protect me? What are you trying to do by deliberately getting close to me? What connection do we have?" Both Ethan and Ryan had to have their wounds treated. Ryan was helped out first by several people. I went to borrow a first aid kit from the owner, and when I returned, only Ethan was still there sitting alone. He looked up and saw me. "Anna, you stayed. Did you think you'd just leave too? I'm your husband. The one who should stay and take care of me most is you." I meant to clean and disinfect his wounds, but Ethan pulled me into his arms instead, lowering his head to kiss me right at the edge of his own cut. I gently reminded him, coaxing, "It's okay." In that kiss I tasted a faint trace of blood. His kiss deepened, his fingers sliding lightly down my spine until my eyes slowly closed, letting myself sink into it, responding willingly, even biting softly at the corner of his mouth. Ethan didn't know that I had actually met him long before, even earlier than Ryan. Things between Ryan and me had never been what he thought. Back then, just before entering high school, I'd once run away after a fight with my mother. It was raining and I saw Ethan. He was sitting in a car as it passed. The driver stopped and told me to get in, bringing me back to my grandfather's house. When I got out, there was still a stretch to walk, so Ethan handed me his umbrella. That day I was disheveled. Later, when we met again, it seemed he didn't remember me. Ryan had always seemed kind to me on the surface, but I had told him clearly I didn't like him. Even so, he kept me close, dragging me to parties I didn't want to attend. At school dances, he wouldn't let me dance with anyone else. The worst time, he nearly forced himself on me right in the classroom. I threatened to call the police before he let go, sneering, "Aren't you just the gift your mother gave me?" Before high school ended, I secretly changed my applications. Determined not to be forced to stay in River City to study with him, I went north, then abroad on exchange. During that time, I interned and met the female editor-in-chief of the headquarters. Before graduation, she returned home and offered me an opportunity. Without that, I probably wouldn't have come back. Later, when I heard the Moore family had gone bankrupt, I felt no sympathy at all. After marrying Ethan, I truly realized that although their backgrounds were similar, he and Ryan were completely different. Now, as he held me, Ethan had no idea that back in those years of high school, I had already quietly hidden feelings for him. And now those faint stirrings had been revived, tinged with a bittersweet ache. When the kiss ended, I whispered, "Do you remember? Back when we were in school, you never once looked at me." He froze for a moment as if recalling something, then answered, "Anna, be good. You never paid attention to me either. You are that sweet, beautiful girl who smiled so brightly, yet you were always cold to the boys." So he did remember me. In his eyes, I had once been beautiful too. Ethan lowered his voice and continued, "Back then, I never imagined a day would come when I'd be coaxing you into kissing me or even willingly taking a beating for you. I'd always been aloof, above it all. I never thought I'd be involved in a fight." I stiffened and asked, "Have you ever done this for anyone else?" That night, I had also realized something. The relationship between him and Emily Lynn didn't seem to be what I'd always believed. He lifted the corner of his lips. "Mrs. Carter, we already have a child together. And now you want to start digging into my past. Anna, aside from you, I've never had another woman. I never liked Emily." I stared at him in shock. "Then how could she convince us all that you did?" Ethan's expression hardened. "Like her? If she weren't your sister, who would she be to me? Why would I care? She kept calling me senior. But after all those years at the same school, I barely even noticed her. So, it turned out Emily had lied to me and to my whole family." The next day, my mother suddenly collapsed at home and had to be rushed to the hospital. After work, I received news that Ethan had come to pick me up at the magazine. He was waiting in the underground garage. When I walked out, he immediately took my bag and work pass from my hands. Wrapping his arms around me, he leaned down and brushed a kiss against the corner of my lips. "It's okay," he murmured to comfort me. Just then, a few of my colleagues stepped out of the opposite elevator. Their eyes widened in shock at the sight of the cold CEO of Carter Corporation holding his wife so intimately in front of them. I didn't have time to dwell on it. I hurried with Ethan to the hospital. When we arrived, my mother had already regained consciousness. She sighed weakly. "It's your father. He wants to hand the company over to that foster daughter in the future. He says Emily is capable, that it's his way of making it up to her. That was why she had been so furious." She fainted. In my eyes, my mother was both infuriating and pitiful. She had never lived for herself. In the end, her biological daughter remained distant, and even her husband wouldn't acknowledge her sacrifices. "Make it up for what?" I demanded, turning to face my father and Emily, who were also there. I looked directly at her. "Why did you lie to our whole family, saying Ethan liked you?" The truth was, my relationship with Emily had never been close. When she first moved in, the Moore family had been our neighbors. Ryan Moore was always out playing, rarely home, and I deliberately avoided him. So we almost never met until one day, Emily took the initiative to invite Ryan over, introducing me as her younger sister. In fact, during all of high school, I only ever accidentally saw her talking to Ethan once. That day, she told my father to have me bring her something, but what I ended up receiving was just a glass of water she'd forgotten. I never imagined that a girl like her would deliberately create false illusions of romance to deceive people. "Because I was jealous of you," Emily answered, her eyes flashing with bitterness. "You were too lucky. Born into a good family, loved by your parents, easily cherished by everyone. But me? Everything I wanted I had to fight for. You were the lucky one. I laughed coldly. Lucky? You were adopted by my father and treated no different from a biological child. My mother only made one mistake, and aside from that, she never treated you badly. My mother held her head in pain. While Ethan went to call the doctor, Emily secretly pulled me aside. Yes, I once lied to you. But now there's something I still want to ask. Has Ethan ever truly been honest with you? When he was studying in the US, he once cared deeply about a girl. One of the coldest winters on a snowy midnight, he drove himself from New York to Washington just because she suddenly fell ill. It was only a common cold. Yet, he still risked everything to take care of her. This isn't just my story, Emily said. Back then many people knew. Even the doctor he brought, his son was our classmate. In the end, the two of them didn't end up together. But her eyes bored into me. Do you know there was someone Ethan Carter couldn't win over? Do you think he's really forgotten? Thankfully, my mother's condition wasn't serious, and before long, she was discharged from the hospital. After Ethan drove my parents home, we returned to the mansion. Grace had been taken to her grandparents, who adored their only granddaughter dearly. Lately, Ethan had been even busier than me. That night, rare quiet surrounded us. After my shower, while I was still putting on skincare, he pulled me onto his lap, kissed lightly at my ear and whispered, "It's been days since we've been close." Neither of us had been sleeping well lately. Yet he still had the energy. In the end, I gave in to him, this time even taking the initiative more than ever before. I straddled him, facing him, leaving no space between us. Normally, he was the one to take charge, but this time, I pressed my finger gently against his thin lips. The wound at the corner of his mouth hadn't healed yet, and faint bruises lingered on his face. I didn't know what excuse he'd given outsiders for those injuries. Ethan noticed my unusual boldness but didn't stop me, letting me do as I pleased. Still, when I hesitated and didn't take the final step, he tightened his arms around my waist, pulling me firmly against him. His voice dropped low and rough, so frank that my heart trembled. "Don't torture me anymore. I've never known how to restrain myself in this." I bent down, gently biting at the cut on his lip. "That girl you once cared about so much, is she still in Washington?" Ethan looked at me and shook his head firmly. "No, because she's right here with me now." That year, Washington's winter really had been heavy with snow. I traveled there for a week with the editor-in-chief on business. It was right when a seasonal flu outbreak spread. Once I caught it, I couldn't get an appointment or even into a hospital. When Ethan knocked on the door of my rented apartment, snow dusted his shoulders. I was in terrible shape, body and mood both at their lowest. Seeing him, I thought Ryan must have sent him. His silence I took as agreement, so I politely declined his help and shut the door on him. Not long after, the editor-in-chief really did bring a doctor for me. I'd always assumed it was her arrangement. Emily never knew. The girl Ethan had driven through the night to Washington to care for was me. Back then, I wasn't confident enough in our marriage. I'd never revealed our relationship to my colleagues until they accidentally discovered it. Only then did I dig out my wedding ring and slip it back on. That was when I noticed the inside of the diamond band had a small engraving. Or 27. 427 meant to love only you. All this time, he had been silently telling me he loved me in his own way. Overcome with emotion, I asked him, "Since when?" "The day I drove you home in the rain," he replied. "Anna," he added, "I've never been a good man." I lifted his face in both hands and whispered, "I've liked you for a long time too." A few days later, my father forced Emily Lynn to finally stand up. "And my apologies to both you and Ethan. From now on, I'll make sure she appears less in front of the two of you." While apologizing, Emily Lynn's tears fell. My father stood beside her and said, "See, she knows she was wrong. It's my fault for not teaching her well enough, making her always feel she's just the adopted daughter, never truly part of our family." Ethan cut in coldly. "Crying doesn't mean she's innocent or pitiful." The truth was, Ethan had only ever interacted with Emily once before in high school. She had carelessly mentioned in front of him that she had a younger sister. He stopped and directly asked her about her relationship with Ryan Moore. With a harmless, eager smile, she'd answered that, of course, Ryan was her younger sister's boyfriend. Ethan looked straight at my father, revealing for the first time a harder side of himself. Now that I'm a father myself, I can't understand how you could defend your adopted daughter right in front of your own biological child. If anyone ever dared to bully my daughter, I would make them pay the steepest price possible. For the first time, he stated his position clearly. There are things I must say outright to the Lin family today. You may use my name as a stepping stone to climb higher and change your fate. But the only condition I've ever had for giving my unconditional support is this. My wife's rights must always be guaranteed. Inheritance of the entire Lin estate can only belong to our daughter. She alone will have the right to decide. That is the true security and fairness I demand for my wife. He added firmly, as for you, you can still choose to be a good father to the point that even your foster daughter can't resent you. But there is one thing you must understand. I don't care about feelings or right and wrong. Whoever stands with Anna, I will stand with them. Not long after that day, the Lin family officially decided to cut ties with Emily Lin. When I heard the news, I was at a gathering after work. Ethan had said he still had things to handle that evening. Yet halfway through, he showed up at the restaurant to pick me up. He even offered to add more wine to the table and covered the entire bill himself. Weren't you supposed to be busy? I asked after pulling him out into the hallway, away from my colleagues inside. Right there in the corridor, Ethan suddenly wrapped his arms around me. Anna, I noticed something different about him. What is it, honey? You met Ryan again today, didn't you? So you know everything now. For the first time in his life, Ethan spoke words of affection without planning them in advance. That day it rained when I met you. Your eyes were wet, and you looked so heartbreakingly sweet. And then when I saw you again later, you were already with Ryan. That was the first time I realized how much I hated the so-called restraint and propriety I'd been taught since childhood. Even as Ethan Carter, someone born with every advantage, there were things I couldn't have, things I couldn't do. Only now do I understand. Being born with morals isn't always a blessing. After that, Ryan Moore disappeared from River City, most likely because of Ethan's hand. By the 5th year of our marriage, Ethan was 28, not yet 30, while most of his friends were still unmarried. Our daughter, Grace Carter, not only had long since learned to call him daddy, but was already 4.5, nearly school age. After I was promoted at the magazine, I discussed with him and finally persuaded him to agree to a photo shoot and interview for a special feature. He had always rarely appeared in public. This was the first time Ethan took the initiative to step into the spotlight. When he arrived for the photo shoot, I technically wasn't in charge of that section, but I still went to the studio. As the cameras focused on him, I stood behind the filming crew the whole time. By noon, he came straight to my office to rest. During lunch, I told him not to touch me. His clothes couldn't be wrinkled before the next session. But Ethan, with that same calm and aloof face as always, didn't listen. He pulled me into his arms and kissed me until he was satisfied. Even if we get caught, he murmured, whatever we do is still reasonable and legal, isn't it? After helping me smooth my clothes, his phone buzzed with a voice message from Grace. He handed it to me so we could listen together. Daddy, her soft, childish voice said. After work, can you buy me a little cake? I want blueberry flavor. Don't tell Mommy. Thank you, Daddy. I smiled at Ethan. So you're the one spoiling her like this, huh? Many people had asked me before whether Ethan was as composed and proper at home as he was in public. Absolutely not. Even when he was wrong, he admitted it quickly, whispering apologies and coaxing me. Just this once, sweetheart. Never again. That evening was his private interview. Besides business, they also touched on family. We've heard you named your daughter Grace Carter, the interviewer said. Does that name symbolize the love between you and your wife? Ethan denied it calmly. No, my daughter doesn't carry anyone's expectations or burdens. The name simply reflects her mother's hope that she will live happily, carefree, and untroubled. Then came a sharper, more direct question. What do you think of the praise that calls you rare, exceptional? Is it really possible for a man to remain untouched by corruption? Or is this image just something your wife created for you? Ethan answered with his own clarity. When I only do what I should, my behavior shouldn't be overly praised as different. You shouldn't ask me why I don't go along with decay, nor assume it's just an image for the cameras. Instead, Raise the expectations for men's conduct and morality as a whole. If my presence can serve as a standard, then that's the reason I'm here in front of you today. Hearing him say those words, I knew very clearly. This was why I loved him. From Ethan's perspective, the first time he met me was the night he arrived late to a gathering, caught in the rain. Everyone else had been discussing the type of girls they liked, beautiful, obedient, and all sorts of shallow words. Normally, Ethan never joined such meaningless conversations. Yet that night, for a moment, he was distracted. Of course, I was beautiful, but what touched his heart first wasn't my appearance. That was the first time Ethan realized he had a clear standard. When someone asked him again, he had replied, "Cute, just a little." Half a month later, we met again. On the first day of school, Ryan Moore brought me along. Ryan boasted and jealously declared, "She's mine." Later, Ethan even confirmed it with my sister. But if back then he had known Emily's intentions, he would never have stayed a moment longer. He seemed proud and aloof. But in truth, it was only the shell of morality he clung to that allowed him to stay clear-headed and rational. Ryan kept me from joining the school's partner dance competition, even going so far as to drive away my potential partner. And yet, I still went to the school's dance studio alone, practicing until late. By then, only the light in my practice room remained lit. In the dark, Ethan often wondered if a girl that small was afraid of the darkness. That was why during that period, he always stayed late, working in the student council building across from the dance studio. Late at night, I would climb onto the stage alone and finish my routine. In that moment, Ethan suddenly realized that, after all, he was still caring about another man's girlfriend. He could fool other people, but he couldn't fool himself. That was why he rushed to study abroad. Because in this world, there are always things more important than love. For a long time, Ethan paid no attention to news from home. Until one day, he heard by chance that I had gone to London. The first thing he thought of was, "It rains often in London. Is there someone to hold an umbrella for her?" He believed he had maintained his indifference. But in a single instant it all crumbled easily. By the time the Moore family went bankrupt, Ryan Moore couldn't handle the blow or the sudden distance, and he left River City. People in our circle whispered that my mother was greedy for wealth and despised poverty, that there was no future for Ryan and me anymore. Others said, it wasn't surprising Ethan would take the chance to step in. He had never been overly flashy. He himself never expected there would be one night that would make me his wife. When I was newly pregnant, just taking folic acid already made me nauseous. Ethan went abroad himself to consult a doctor friend. His friend said, "Haven't you already hired a private family doctor for your wife? Why come all the way to me again? This isn't serious." Ethan answered, "I don't know. I just feel like I'm still not doing enough. When I see her uncomfortable, I just want to do more." His friend laughed and patted his shoulder. "Don't be so tense." Only then did Ethan suddenly realize he was truly about to become a father. Toward the end of my pregnancy, someone tried to get close to me, whispering slander, but Ethan found out early and stopped it. That woman had been the one originally meant to be sent to Ethan's hotel room by the business partner that night. Naively, she thought that without me, she would have become Mrs. Carter. But she had been dreaming foolishly. If it hadn't been me, Ethan would never have touched anyone else. That night, neither of us had been fully clear-headed. Ethan had forced himself to ask me, "Who am I?" And it was my own blurred whisper that made him lose control. In truth, he had known before me that Ryan might return to River City. That night at my grandfather's birthday banquet, Ethan had clearly sensed that something was wrong with me. Across from the banquet venue was the Moore family's villa, already sold. Ethan spoke half to me and half to himself. "Nothing can change anymore. Even if Ryan comes back, nothing can change now." Much later, he understood that we had both been bound by a simple lie, almost missing each other entirely. If the law can't punish, he thought, then I'll act myself. And yet even so, Ethan still felt he could never make up for it. If I could have one chance to go back, he thought, facing that naive girl from high school, I wouldn't bring her morals or worldly eyes. I would pull her into my arms no matter what. The magazine interview ended. Ethan and I went home together. The moment Grace saw me, she knew right away her father hadn't bought her a piece of cake today. And yet Ethan, in his role as father, pretended to act clueless and asked, "Why isn't my little girl happy?" Grace pouted. "Daddy, who could ever be happy about going to school or work?" That evening, she was playing on the swing in the garden. At first, Ethan sat next to her watching over her. Before long I stepped outside too. I had just showered. My face felt soft and cool. My hair still damp, but even so my appearance made Ethan's heart skip a beat. He smiled faintly, stood up and pulled out his phone, turning on the flashlight and raising it high so the light cast over me. Half joking and half serious like a gentleman, he bowed slightly. "My beloved princess," he said softly, "may I invite you to dance tonight?" And just like that, the unfinished couple's dance from years ago was finally completed. I placed my hand into his. "It's my honor," I whispered,